just to get the minutes approved and everything. We're not going to go into any community or membership or anything at this point right now. Hopefully we'll have an extra bit of time at the end of the meeting to do some committee reports because our new membership co-chairs have a lot to talk about. But first, I do want to say that I have appointed everyone into the committees. So just to let everyone know, for the membership committee, we have Patrick and Adam. You guys raise your hands so everyone can see who you are. Where's Patrick? Okay. And then for the greening committee, it's still Deb. Right? Okay. And then for the government affairs, it's Casey still. And then safety is Richard Lee.
When we're getting potential co-chairs, I spoke with 2 members that are interested. So,
okay, great. So then you'll let us know about that as well. And then we have Katie, who is still in charge of all the events and social media. And we've got Leanne, who is in charge of the website and the e-post. All right, everybody good? Perfect. Drew, let's get the minutes approved so we can move forward with this meeting. Where are you, Drew? There you are.
There I am. Thank you, Tammy. I think, did you also want to mention Finance Committee that Bob chairs?
Well, Bob was already voted in as treasurer
Okay,
because he's executive committee.
got it. All right, so minutes, yes. I circulated a draft. The last meeting was held on December 13th, which was also, as you just referenced, Tammy, the organizational meeting of the board of directors following the elections that were held in November. So if there's no questions or comments, actually, if there are, Julia, do you have a question on the minutes, or was that an earlier hand raise?
Kind of a broad question. Hi. And for
Hi.
Tammy, like with governance, now that it's January, I think I'm required to sit on a committee, and I'm pretty sure I'm on finance.
You are.
Okay. Just
You
making
are
sure. Like,
absolutely on finance, but if you want to sit on governance as well, you can sit on all committees, just so you know, as well as everyone on the board this year is on the membership committee. So you're automatically on that committee.
okay, got it. Yeah, we'll start with the 2, membership and finance. And just remind me if I'm supposed to vote on something and you're not seeing me vote, just, you know, general governance, not the governance committee. So thank you.
Got it. You got it.
Any questions, comments on the minutes from December 13th? And if not, I guess we'd love to have a motion for their approval.
motion approved.
Thank you, Adam, Jonathan. Any further comments? Any opposed? All right, Tammy, I think we have minutes, and then just confirming, Leanne, you'll post them up on the website?
Yes, I will.
Okay,
I've already got the how-to reminder pulled up.
thank you.
Okay, great. All right, then we're going to move right in with Jonathan.
Thank you, Tammy. So as everyone's hopefully aware, we have Ian Whitman, and who else we have from planning? We have Mason Austin from Planning Commission here with us today to discuss the consideration of remapping of certain areas of Washington Square West. So background on this, we had started this process in 2018. We had a couple of public meetings regarding it, and we'd actually gotten to a point where I think we needed one more meeting. We were going to then consider it, and then it was going to be sent to Councilman Scola for an ordinance. And then COVID, of course, happened, and it kind of got derailed. We've been trying to kind of get it back up and running, and we've been working with the planning commission to get that process started, and after few requests, it finally came through, and so we've gotten the process started again. The map that is going to be presented today is almost identical to the one that was presented 3 years ago. The major changes are for buildings that have changed since then. That they've made changes. They're proposing changes to match the buildings that are there. So, and as I mentioned, Ian and Mason, is anyone else here that is, okay, Ian and Mason and other folks will be writing in the chat, Elizabeth, that members of the Planning Commission are there. A few ground rules for the presentation that's about to happen. So Ian and Mason are going to go through the map. Is my understanding, they're going to go through property by property, explain the change, explain the proposed change, and then request for the two of you is it also kind of like why that change is relevant to that property, because obviously, like, if we're changing from commercial to residential, we're not changing it for every consideration, but it's just probably like one or two, like, for example, to protect ground for a commercial or something like that. So to the extent that there's a specific reason why that change has occurred, it would be great to mention that. While they are presenting, if questions on what they're presenting could occur in the chat function, that would be our preferred. After they are done presenting, they will answer questions that were asked in the chat, and then we will open it up to the public. And a little bit different than normal zoning committee. The zoning committee and the board will not have any specific say or any advanced say in before the community. So it's really more of a community comment and discussion. It should also be known that some questions that are asked of the Planning Commission tonight will not be answered because it might be something they need to come back to the Planning Commission and discuss. So they'll acknowledge the question and just say, thank you, and we'll, go back and consider it. And then at the next presentation, they will, explain their change. A couple other things. This meeting is being held twice, so it's being held obviously now. It will be held again in 2 weeks in person at the Blumel Building on the first floor. We will send the address out very quick soon, 7 o'clock. It's a regular zoning meeting, but again, they will be presenting there, and they will have a large physical map because sometimes it is very difficult to kind of comprehend all of this on a screen. And if people have specific questions about their property that might warrant a more intimate discussion, I believe, and if the Planning Commission believes that a one-on-one personal discussion is more appropriate than a Zoom meeting, but please ask questions here as well. And I think that's all I have. So Ian and Mason, if floor is yours, and Ian is just proposing the map, and also just comment, I think you're going to do this anyways, but also just a discussion on how this progress will proceed. That goes to the councilman, ordinance will be introduced, and so forth and so on. So Ian, Mason, I leave it to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm gonna share my screen. Worth noting that we're not gonna go through every single proposed change, as that would take too long. But we have an interactive map where you can search by property, and I'll be going through the major changes. And again, we're gonna have an in-person meeting in 2 weeks where we can get into more detail. So, share screen. All right, can everyone see that? All right.
Okay. Well, it's loading. It says loading right now.
Yes, we can see it. It's just loading.
Okay. How about now? Sorry.
Yep.
Yep. it's
Okay.
there.
So, like Jonathan said, we started this process in the before times, before COVID. And what you see today is very similar to that. There's a few small changes, mostly to account for development that happened in the interim. And then we're also not doing anything east of 8th Street, as we did that in a bill with the Side Hill Civic Association, which you guys reviewed and approved. So this is remapping for the area bounded by Walnut Street, 7th Street, South Street, and Broad Street. So I'm going to talk very basically what is zoning. That's a very complex topic, but I'll hit, sort of the main topics. Then we'll talk about zoning mapping progress throughout the city and in Center City. Then I'll go over a brief explanation of the different zoning districts that are in Wash West. Again, only hitting the main points. We have a zoning guide, which I'll share with you that explain in detail. Then I'll show what the existing zoning map looks like, talk about what our goals are for this, and then the proposed zoning map. And I'm going to go through sort of 5 main focus areas, and then I'll talk about next steps and share some resources. So what is zoning? Everyone who owns land owns a set of property rights that come with that land. And zoning regulates what you can do on that land in terms of use, whether that's residential, commercial, a mix of uses, height, and also the massing of the building. There's a number of things, unfortunately, zoning cannot regulate. There's other ways to regulate these, but we're not here to talk about that tonight. That includes construction techniques, the issue of rental property versus homeownership, trash, crime, and property management. So then when we talk about zoning, there's 2 ways which a building project can proceed. The first is what's called by right development. This means that a building proposal fits all the requirements of the zoning code and the property zoning classification. In this case, all that's required is to get a zoning permit from L&I, then a building permit, then the project happens. However, there's other projects where you need a variance, which is where you need an exemption from one or more aspects of the zoning code. So in this case, relief is required from the zoning code, and those variances are granted by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And anyone involved in the zoning committee knows a lot about the zoning board. These include use variances, dimensional variances, and also special exceptions. So this is our citywide zoning mapping progress since 2012. So we've remapped over 6,500 acres. It's everything here in purple. As you can probably tell, certain council districts remap much more than others. And then orange is what the city is kind of actively working on. And then the blue is things that have been proposed that have not gone to legislation yet, including what we're going to talk about today. And then in Center City, this is more of an expanded Center City. These are the remappings we've done sort of on a neighborhood scale. So we've done Northern Liberties, Old City, Bella Vista, Cal Hill, Chinatown North, East Cal Hill, Logan Square, Queen Village, West Poplar, Francisville, East Poplar. We've done a portion of Rittenhouse Square, and we've also done Society Hill. And as you can see, after 2020, it kind of dropped off. Council had more important things to be doing with COVID and everything, but we're sort of back. You're not the only neighborhood that's bringing this back, so we hope to pick up the pace a little bit. And then there's a number of zoning districts in Washington Square West that you'll see, and they have alphanumeric symbols. So you'll see something like RSA 5. So there's letters and numbers, and the letters are an indication of the intended character, and the numbers, the higher the number goes, the more intense the development is. It's all relative to the other numbers within that category. The number following the dash, as I said, is an indicator of the density. Some districts have set height limits in feet. Other districts are controlled by floor area ratio, which I will go over right now. So floor area ratio, or FAR, is a ratio determined by dividing the gross floor area of all the buildings on the lot by the area of the lot. So all 3 of these diagrams here are 100% FAR. So for example, if a lot's 10,000 square feet, 100% FAR would be 10,000 square feet of building. So a lot of the more commercial districts in Center City are controlled by floor area ratio. There's other requirements that determine a building's massing, but this is a very basic, it's stand-in for height. So you're going to see a number of residential districts. They're usually colored yellow and orange. So you'll see RSA 5. This is a residential single-family attached. It's your basic single-family row home. The height of these is capped at 38 feet. You're going to see RM1, which is the same height limit as the RSA 5. However, these can have multiple units, and the number of units depends on the size of the underlying lot. So you'll also see some residential districts that are regulated by floor area ratio. These include RM2 and 4. RM2 it has a 70 floor area ratio, and RM4 is a 350 floor area ratio. You don't see much of these, but you do see some of them. The vast majority will be RM1. Then you'll also see RMX3, which is a residential mixed use. This is multifamily low to mid-rise. The floor area ratio is 500, and limited ground floor commercial is allowed. A lot of older apartment buildings with small commercial spaces in Center City are zoned this way. And then on commercial districts, we have sort of lower scale commercial districts that are annotated by CMX 1, 2, and 2.5. These are commercial mixed use, hence the CMX. So CMX 1 is a 38 feet height limit. And in this case, ground floor commercial is optional. And then it'll be single family or multifamily based on what zoning is adjacent. CMX 2 is also 38 feet, requires ground floor commercial, and also allows multifamily. And then there's CMX 2.5, which is a higher height limit of 55 feet. Ground floor commercial space is required, and that's also multifamily above the commercial space. And then you'll see CMX 3 and 4, which interestingly are the same color on the map. They both have a 500 FAR. However, due to different zoning bonuses for things like green building, mixed income housing, etc., they can get higher. And then there's CMX 5, which is the sort of biggest zoning district in Center City. That's a 1200 FAR, and it can get a lot higher with zoning bonuses. So this is just a chart showing what those base floor area ratios are and how high a project can max out with bonuses. Lots of caveats here, including the fact that any mixed income housing bonuses do not count towards a maximum. There's also the open space district, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's green. Currently zoned for open space is Washington Square, Town Park, Seeger Park, Star Garden, and the Addison Street Park. There are some things not zoned for open space, so you'll see us on a map proposing those become zoned for open space, which is SP-PO-A. This includes the South Street Community Garden, Waverly Street Community Garden, and the Sartain Garden. And then there's also something called the Center City Overlay District that's annotated by a /CTR. This, in one form or another, covers almost everything in Washington Square West, and it's additional controls for height, setback, and build-to lines, supplemental uses, parking, loading, signs, special review areas, bulk, and massing. We're not going to get into that today, as we're not talking about that. We're only talking about base zoning districts. So this is the existing zoning map. Again, the colors annotate what the zoning district is. So everything from the yellow, which is RSA 5, single family row homes, all the way up to the darkest red, which is CMX 5, which is our highest density commercial mixed use district. So what are the goals? So we have 5 goals. The first is to protect commercial corridors. And the first main focus is to focus commercial on the most viable corridors. You'll see on the map, there's a lot of commercial zoning. A lot of it is CMX 1, which makes commercial optional. So the idea here is to use other zoning districts in place of the CMX 1 to focus commercial on the most viable corridors. On Antique Row, this is currently zoned CMX 1, which would allow for an all residential structure. So to prevent residential uses on the ground floors, we're proposing to rezone Antique Row, for example. And on 13th Street, we want to protect the scale and vitality of 13th Street. You'll see there's a lot of CMX 5 on the map, and we're going to propose trimming some of that back. And second, which is sort of related to 13th Street, is to better manage the transition between the neighborhood scale to the south and east and the commercial scale to the north and west. Thirdly, we want to encourage appropriate development on vacant or underdeveloped lots. Number 4 is to protect the row home fabric and single family homes. And number 5 is to correct zoning and reduce nonconformities. So a nonconformity is a building that exists, that doesn't conform with its underlying zoning. So this is the proposed zoning map. Everything outlined in black is a proposed change. I know there's a lot to see here, but again, we do have the interactive map, and I'm going to go through sort of 5 focus areas. I'm going to talk about South Street and the area of Lombard Street from roughly 12th to Broad Street, Antique Row, 10th and 11th Streets, and then 13th Street. So first, this is the proposed zoning on South Street. This is where the Whole Foods and Acme's are. So they're currently zoned CMX2, and the proposal here is to change their zoning to CMX 2.5. So if one of these buildings were to say burn down, go away, this zoning would then regulate what can be built there. And the South Street Community Garden is currently zoned for residential multifamily, and we would be proposing to rezone that to special purpose open space. On Lombard Street, so these are, number 4 here is actually labeled wrong. Sorry. Actually, number 1 and number 4 are flipped. Sorry. So what looks like number 4 here is actually number 1. That is the St. Peter Clavers. That is a church property. It's currently zoned for single family, which would mean that they could only build one house on the entire property. So we're going to remap it to RM1 to match the rest of the block. Then there's the Carriage House and Waverly Court on the northwest corner of 13th and Lombard. They're zoned a mix of RM1 and CMX2. Those are larger apartment buildings with some commercial, so the proposal to zone them RMX3. Next is the Casa Farnese Apartments. That's zoned RM1. That's sort of a high-rise building, so the proposal here is to zone that RMX3. And then what says number 1 on the map is actually number 4. The Juniper East Apartments are zoned CMX4. That building is not built to that scale, so this would remap that to CMX3. Antique Row, so everything you see outlined here that says CMX2 is currently CMX1, meaning you could build a residential building on the ground floor. Also worth noting that CMX1, if adjacent to RSA5, can only be 1 unit. So the proposal here is to remap this to CMX2, which would require commercial on the ground floor and allow multiple units on the floors above. Then there's some other smaller changes, including the parcels fronting on Waverly Street to zone them instead of being CMX1, RSA5 or RM1, depending on which block they're on, and the Waverly Street Community Garden to zone that for open space. Next, this is 10th and 11th Streets. So the idea is to focus commercial more on 10th Street. So one side of 10th Street currently requires ground floor commercial, and then the west side doesn't. So this would remap the west side of CMX2, requiring commercial. And then over on 11th Street, we would focus commercial on the corners. The rest of the block would remain CMX1, allowing for commercial, but also allowing for some of the residential buildings there to remain. And then the northwest corner of 11th and Spruce, that's Green Street Coffee, that would be CMX2. And then there's also buildings on the south side of Spruce on the corners that are currently zoned CMX2. So in this case, one of them would be remapped to RMX3, and the other would be mapped from RM1 to CMX2. These masks the existing buildings that are built on those corners. So a lot of what I've gone over through A through D so far is a lot of corrective zoning, meaning we want to reduce nonconformities and make small changes to direct commercial. So what you see on this map here, there's a lot of big changes here. So a lot of this area is zoned CMX5, which is our highest zoning category. And then some of this is zoned CMX4. So generally, we're taking everything and sort of proposing to knock it down a notch. There are some cases like the 12th Street Gym Block where a large building has been approved under CMX5 zoning in the interim, so we will simply not remap that block. So on 13th Street from Walnut down to Locust, we're proposing to remap this from CMX5 to CMX4, which is a lower density district. The west side of 13th Street from Locust to Spruce, the proposal is to remap this also from CMX5 to CMX4. And then the east side of 13th from Locust to Spruce, it's currently zoned CMX1, so it's a pretty big jump. So we're proposing a mix of CMX3, RM1, and RMX3, depending on the building types on the block now. There are some other changes in this area, but don't have the time to go through property by property tonight. So the next steps are to complete community outreach. Like I said, we're going to be coming back to you in 2 weeks for an in-person meeting where we'll have large printouts of this. We'll be able to search property by property on an interactive map. And then our recommendations will be sent to Councilman Squilla, who's aware we're working on this, and then working with his office, a bill will be drafted, and then he would introduce the bill in the City Council. And then it goes through a series of public hearings and reviews, including at the Planning Commission and also at the Rules Committee of City Council. And then eventually there would be a council vote and a mayoral action. So we have a couple of resources to help with this process. The first is an interactive map. There's a QR code on the screen and also a bit.ly link. So on this map, you'll be able to slide like a digital slider, see the existing, the proposed zoning, you can click. You can also search by property address. And then the second resource is the zoning quick guide. This contains much of what's in the zoning code in a more easily digestible form. So for example, on the screen is the page that talks about CMX3, but there's a page for every zoning district. And on the left-hand side is all of the dimensional requirements. And the right-hand side is a use table that shows which uses are allowed by right or what you need a variance for. There's also special exceptions, which is a use that needs zoning board requirement, zoning board approval, but is not quite a variance. So these two resources are very helpful. We developed a lot of these during COVID to help with processes like this. And then me and Mason are here to answer questions. And this is my email address. So I would encourage you to send questions to me and we'll try to get back to you, and we can try to answer questions from the chat today. However, some things we may need to get back to you on if we don't have an answer right now.
Ian, so I'm gonna go through the various chat comments.
Sure.
And this kind of, well, obviously you can read them. Kind of starting the first question from Elizabeth at 713, and this is just she has a question, it's a comment. She has a question to identify things regarding the historic district, but also just can you explain why this is a different process in the historic district, why the two of them can run parallel and kind of, well, are both affect one of each other, but are actually mutually exclusive?
Yeah, so a historic district, which would be regulated by the Historical Commission, that regulates things like design and building materials, and also can prevent demolition. Zoning is more about the bulk and massing and use of the building. So the two things operate separately. However, they can inform each other, but they're two separate processes.
Thank you. Kind of going through with on CMX2 and commercial use, is parking allowed on the property?
So in most of these districts, so in CMX2, in the CMX 2.521, the RSA 5, the RM1, those types of districts do not require parking. However, it doesn't mean that a developer can't propose parking. So we have parking minimums, we don't have parking maximums. Then in the CMX 345, those types of districts, parking is required 3 spaces for every 10 apartments, but there's no parking requirement for commercial or office. So the answer to that specific question is CMX 2.5, you can have parking, but I would bet in most, 9 out of 10 cases in Center City, you're not going to have parking on a project of that size.
Next question. Do you have any issue sharing these slides? You can send.
So
you can send
I'll send a PDF of this slideshow to Jonathan, and then she can share it.
Question: how do you find a question about the Center City district overlay zoning that controls parking? And I guess it's how do you find out about that? And just kind of
so everything is in the Philadelphia Code. There's a chapter for zoning. There's a lot in there, but the Center City overlay is in that chapter. If you want to dig deep into the zoning code, it's all available on the internet. I can share that link as well. But it's hundreds and hundreds.
I guess why don't you express like what an overlay is compared to the basic?
Okay, so an overlay zoning, an overlay is additional controls on a property. So the Center City overlay, which originated in the 80s, is sort of designed to protect Center City. There's things like, there's view corridors to City Hall. There's additional requirements for buildings on Walnut Street and Chestnut Street. There's parking garage ground floor requirements. So there's different things that don't exist outside of Center City that sort of overlay what the base zoning is. And we're not proposing to modify any of that now.
Understood. Can you go through the Waverly Street changes one more time? So just to review those.
Sorry. So the idea here, so everything on these blocks right now, the blocks that between Waverly and Pine are zone CMX1, whether it's a parcel that fronts Pine Street in Antigua or a home fronting Waverly Street. So the idea here is to take the parcels that front Pine Street and make them CMX2, therefore requiring commercial. And then the parcels that have no frontage on Pine Street would be zoned residential, whether it's RM1 or RSA5, depending on what's sort of on that block. And again, on the interactive map, you can search directly by address and sort of get much more detail on this.
Next question, is there another form of this document that's possibly like by just simply address and proposed changes that's not graphic? That exists?
No, but we can make that. I mean, going property by property would take a long time. So the interactive map, you can search by property.
There's been some requests.
Yeah.
They can be confusing. I would also suggest, and Lynn, this is your question. If there are people who have questions about specific addresses, again, email Ian or email myself at zoning@washwestcivic.org, and we can answer specific questions about those addresses.
Yeah, and for the comment about interactive stuff being confusing, so at the meeting 2 weeks from today, we'll have large printouts that we can sort of talk about, in person, like we used to in the good old days. So, if the interactive map's not right for you, I would encourage you to show up to that meeting.
There's a comment, and I guess to speak the process, that every property owner each parcel should be notified, about the proposed zoning changes occurring, and that everyone affected should be notified. Can you explain kind of when it goes to Councilman Squilla and City Council, what type of notification processes are required?
Yeah, so legally speaking, we are not required to notify every property owner. The Councilman Squilla can decide to do that if he wants to. I would say that we'll make sure as many people know the proposed changes as possible. Again, everything you see on the screen here is still in draft form, so it's not actually a bill that's proposed yet. But it is possible to do that. I know that after this meeting, we are gonna sort of reach out to other groups, including the BIA, to try to get awareness of this process. However, it's up to the council person's office how he chooses to proceed, whether he wants to draft legislation as one bill, multiple bills, and how much outreach they do. But there, city council requires certain advertising of bills. However, notifying every individual property owner is not a legal requirement.
But I will note that for Liz and Maria and for others who are requesting this, we will make certain that Councilman Squilla is aware of your concern and of your request. And as Ian said, then it'll be to his consideration on how he wants to proceed with that. Going through these. Let's see. Someone has a question. Do these regulations pertain to the new Jefferson helicopter flight zoning overlay?
Yeah. So the Jefferson helicopter flight path is an overlay. So that would sit on top of any changes proposed. I don't know if none of this would affect that because it's an overlay. So the answer is no, I guess it doesn't affect that.
And there's a question, obviously, if changes to zoning are made, does that automatically result in any change to the center city overlay parking districts?
No.
No. Can you give examples of how number 4 and number 5, and I assume that's, I'm not sure which sheet that was on, might affect a property? What is an example of nonconformity? I guess, can you explain, like, give an example of a building that's non-conforming and the proposed?
Yeah. So
also, can you explain why it's important for the building to match its zoning?
yeah, so if we change a parcel zoning, it doesn't, anything that we propose, once it's legislation, is from that date forward. So anything that already exists and is legal can continue to exist. And if it's a non-conformity, that means that what's built doesn't match the zoning. It happens a lot in Center City because most of Center City was built before zoning existed. All that means is if you needed to make a change to your building, you're probably going to trigger a variance, which would require you to go to the zoning board. So where possible, we want to reduce nonconformities so that buildings that are legally built can operate. And if they need to make some changes, and they're conforming with the zoning, it would be a by right proposal and they wouldn't need to go to the zoning board. And then an example of a nonconformity, I mean, there's tons of them. It can be a non-conforming use. It could be dimensionally non-conforming. There's probably, plenty of row homes in Center City that are taller than 38 feet. But because the closest zoning district we have is RSA 5, it's capped at 38 feet. That's an example. Or, there could be something that's zoned, let's say you're zoned CMX2, but, the structure that was already there and built, is 50 feet tall. That's another example. So where possible, we want to reduce nonconformities, understanding it's not possible to completely do it. And if it's a legally built structure, then the nonconformity is perfectly legal. It's just that when you go to make changes, that's when the zoning would matter.
The specific question of what is the proposed change to the property at Quince and Locust, and looking at that, it's from CMX1 is going to RM1, from what I'm looking at the interactive map. Can you let us know how these changes affect the neighborhood, the gay residents and businesses? I'm not certain if there's any, I want to comment to that.
Well, if your zoning did affect them, your zoning would not be legal. So, zoning shouldn't have any effect on that. So I would say that it shouldn't have an effect at all.
And just going through it again. So just a clarification on the CMX2, is parking prohibited or the parking in variance?
It's very hard to make, due to the requirements of zoning code, it's very hard to make parking work on a CMX2 lot in Center City, with everything that's in CMX2 and in the Center City overlay. But it's not expressly prohibited. It's just, I would say financially doesn't really make any sense for a new CMX building to propose parking. So not entirely prohibited, but most likely not going to happen. Not
But
required.
if someone had a CMX2 lot that had a backyard in it that could accommodate a car, would they be able to park there?
It would depend on how they're accessing the parking, but strictly speaking, it's possible. But there's other requirements for how you access parking in the Center City overlay.
Comment: the Center City zoning code is indecipherable. How can we find out answers to specific questions? Is emailing you with specific questions okay? As we've asked before, you can certainly email Ian or myself at zoning@washingtonwestcivic.org and we'll get the answers.
Yeah, zoning in general, the zoning code in general is pretty complex. I would say the Center City overlay itself is one of the more complex sections. I can help as I know my way around the Center City overlay. In many cases, there's a lot of stuff in the Center City overlay that generally doesn't pertain to Wash West, but some things will.
It's a two-part question. Why is the 1100 block of Spruce currently zoned CMX1?
Why?
What's your thought on that?
So some of the, a lot of the zoning districts in the core of Center City were first mapped like in the 1930s. And over time, as the zoning code changed and districts were created, things kind of filtered down. So in many cases, there's not really a modern reason why anything is zoned the way it is, which is why we want to do this process. So I don't have an answer for why something is zoned the way it is now. I can probably answer why we want to change things, but in terms of why something's zoned the way it is now, I don't really know.
And then a similar question: why is the 1000 block of Spruce currently zoned RM1? And I would just make a comment to everyone listening to Elizabeth. When the planning commission, we know the neighborhood a little bit better than they do. So if there's specific nonconformities or other areas where you're like, this entire block is single family residential and it should stay single family residential and it's currently labeled commercial or something that is not representative of what's built there, please let them know, and it's certainly something they'll consider.
I would say I'm generally familiar with most of Center City, but I don't live in Wash West, and you guys do. So, a lot of these changes came directly from Jonathan and his his people at the zoning committee of Wash West. And again, we did present much of this a few years ago. So I think a lot of this is probably, spot on. However, there's probably things we missed. So, I don't claim to be an expert on the neighborhood. So if there's something that jumps out, please let us know. Everything you see here is a draft. Nothing becomes, official until it's a bill of city council. So, we're working through the process, and there's going to be changes that happen along the way.
There's a proposed zoning, there's a nightclub called Taboo on 12th Street that would be CMX1. Would that prohibit the current business at the site? Or the CMX1 is based on the adjacent uses too, is that
The
correct?
CMX1 allows for, I think
It does not, but it's already properly permitted, the changing of, like, the zoning wouldn't affect it.
Thank you, Mason. That's what I was trying to get at.
Right, so
We
if
can
the
look
building is,
Specifically,
go on, sorry.
yeah, but CMX1 wouldn't allow for that specific use. But if it's a legally permitted use, it can continue, in perpetuity, even if we change the zoning.
And even if it changes owners, for that matter. The only way that it would cease to become legal is if there's a discontinuation of that use for 3 years, then that restriction would apply.
Another request for, a street by street, address by address change. And another suggestion that every affected neighbor shall be notified. And again, we will be certain that Councilman Squill is aware of people's concerns regarding that. Thanks for the presentation. I know this will be hard for you to speak to this, but are the changes going to make it easier or harder to build housing in Washington Square West? We have an affordability crisis in Philadelphia and need to increase our housing supply. Wash West has more, if not more duty here than other parts of the region. Looks like there's some good upzoning, but also some concern downzoning, IG CMX2 to CMX1. Can you speak to any of this?
I would say that that's probably a complex question to answer. I hope it would not make it harder. I'm assuming that some of these CMX5 to CMX4 proposals are going to get pushed back from the development community, but I would say there's a fair number of sort of adjustments up in other areas. I don't know the answer to that question though. I would hope that we're not making it harder, because I don't think that's our goal.
But just to be straightforward, it would, any of these changes would reduce the amount of housing that can be built by right for downzoning. Ian is correct to say that insofar as these things depend on market demand to mean anything, it's hard to know how that would play out in reality. But just purely based on what is allowed to be built by right, a downzoning would reduce the amount of housing that would be allowed to be built.
Question is, what does townhome fabric refer to? What was meant by that when we were looking at that?
Yeah, so I mean, in a lot of areas of Center City, you go from mid high rise development down to row homes pretty quickly, and the underlying zoning doesn't always match. So there's some of these blocks where you'll see, some of the smaller proposed changes that on the sort of the back sides of blocks or on some of the more narrow streets. In a lot of those cases, the zoning from the larger street kind of goes all the way through the block. So where possible, we are remapping those to protect the fabric that exists.
Request to rezone the 1100 block of Spruce Street like the 1000 block of Spruce Street. Again, we'll look at suggestions like that and see what the consideration is. Yeah. How does this zoning change impact the Jefferson University institutional district? Does it facilitate transition between the normal scale of the campus and the small scale of Wash West? And I guess I would speak to Ian that your investigation of why a special district wasn't made for Jefferson's campus.
I forgot to mention that. So we're not proposing to touch to change any zoning of either Jefferson or Pennsylvania hospitals. For Jefferson Hospital specifically, an institutional zoning district, as the code currently works, is not possible. They don't meet the requirements. They have too much floor area and not enough open space. So we're not proposing to change any of the zoning for any of the hospital parcels. So a lot of the underlying zoning for Jefferson is CMX5, so they're not restricted much. A lot of Pennsylvania hospital zoning is residential, so every time they want to do something, they need to go to the zoning board, but we're not proposing to change any of that right now.
Ian and Mason, can you include your emails in the chat, if you wouldn't mind? A sharing of concerns about some of the down zoning, basically understanding why some areas are slated for down zoning and how it would affect potential new housing. Specifically, I think this is the northwest corner where the CMX5 is going down zone to CMX4 potentially.
Mhm. So we're making the proposal because in most cases, the existing, most of these blocks are built out and the existing fabric is not at CMX5, height. So the 12th Street Gym is a really good example. That block was zoned CMX5, and the existing fabric is going to, be demolished for a new high rise. Not saying it's a bad building, but there's a lot of parts of the neighborhood where, the zoning is overly permissive. Another good example is Jewelers Row is zoned CMX5. Again, we're not proposing anything for Jewelers Row here, but there's some cases where overly permissive zoning can have an effect on preservation. So we're trying to balance sort of the need for development with sort of the fabric of the neighborhood and preservation. I know that sort of large down zonings will often kill a proposal for remapping, so we're trying to be sort of balance both, the need for development and growth, and also the need to preserve the neighborhood.
Would you mind pulling up your interactive map and just kind of quickly showing how it works if you're able to do that?
Yep. Can you guys see that?
I can.
So there's like a slider here that when you slide back and forth, it goes from existing to proposed. There's also a legend on the side here that tells you what the different colors mean. And then you can click parcel and it'll zoom into it and it'll tell you what sort of the existing zoning, the proposed zoning, and also the address. And then at the top left, you can search by a specific address and the map will zoom to that address.
Thank you. Katie also posted.
And if you zoom in close enough, the parcel lines will appear. If you zoom out further, you're not going to see, specific parcels. But once you get close enough, then you can see individual parcels.
Very specific question. Some properties that are proposed for zoning changes are using their backyards for parking, and they're more and more converting their backyards for parking. Does CMX1 to CMX2 make this easier or harder for people to park? And obviously, as you're hearing, this is a specific issue that's kind of coming up a lot. But
are these things going to the zoning board?
No, they're not. It's and the problem is that from my understanding and talking to attorneys, you can build the parking space and you can pave the parking space, but it's not really a problem until someone parks their car there. So it's a quirky issue from a neighbor standpoint.
Yeah, CMX 1 or 2 should not really have an impact on that, but that sounds like lawyer speak that you could.
Yeah.
That I don't know. That sounds like something that's trying to get around the zoning code. I don't know if I have an explanation for that right now though.
Okay. Comment that CMX5 closest current fabric is blonde. So again, as a why it's down zoning of CMX4 is being recommended. Devils in details, we want to consider Corner Creek. No one wants another 11th and Walnut disaster. Rezoning of parking lot at 13th and Pine from RM1 to RMX3 to height completely out of scale with the surrounding buildings. So RMX, if you look at that, that's the 11th. I remember speaking about that one years ago. The 13th to Pine lot, which I believe is the lot above crossing Dirty Frank's. And so RMX3 would allow for a 5-story building. Is that correct?
So it's a 500 FAR, so it could be 5 times the area of the lot. So it's not a direct number of, if it covers the whole lot, then it would be 5 stories.
Right. It's probably 5 to 7 stories.
Yeah,
Yeah, and again, so it's a consideration from someone who's stating that that does not meet on the neighborhood of the character. Comment that 12th Street should not be CMX5. Another comment that the market demand of CMX, we don't want the market demand of CMX5 to destroy the character of the neighborhood. A 500 tower on 12th and Walnut Locust is a travesty. Mason posting his email again. Can you go to slide 17? Protecting commercial properties takes priority over protecting residential properties.
I don't think that these numbers are necessarily priority. Well, I don't think one takes priority over another. They're just a numbered list. I don't think one is more important than 4 or 5. I think we're trying to do both. So there's a lot of lots we'll see. There's a lot of spaces on like Antique Row or 10th or 11th where you'll see sort of the parcels facing the larger street getting changed, and then sort of smaller parcels at front to back streets getting changed. Because right now it's just like a broad brush commercial. So I think we're doing both in a lot of these cases.
To be blunt, I disagree that things like conformity and character are more important in making sure people can afford a roof over their head. The lot on 13th and Pine is not a historic lot. This is a great place for a bunch of apartments. Comment that this makes it clear the priorities of the Planning Commission. Casey, I read the Planning Commission's priorities as wanting to protect the integrity of the neighborhood while balancing the enormous and frankly inevitable need for a city to evolve and grow. Commercial includes corridors like Antique Row, which are integral to the fabric of this neighborhood and just as important to preserve and protect as our residential areas. Comment that the quick zoning guide has been published and posted again. Another comment that the neighborhood should not be changed. We don't, at least I would not believe that what is being proposed is doing that. And we're at the end of comments. And comments can be added, but I think I'm gonna, right now we're kind of debating some properties individually. So comment debates like that, I think are better discussed in person when we're speaking about specific lots. So that it'll be able to look at that lot and look at adjacent lots and kind of determine the appropriateness of the suggestions or the appropriate of new suggestions.
Yeah, just worth noting one more time that everything shown here is a draft. We're making a proposal. It's ultimately going to be in the hands of Councilman Swilla. And I know that we're not going to get everything exact. You know, most of this neighborhood was built long before zoning existed. But you know, the current map in many cases is not helping. And it causes a lot of needless, you know, trips to the zoning board or buildings that are wildly out of scale. So we're trying to sort of balance the need to accommodate growth, but also the need to protect what makes Center City special. There's a lot of areas of Center City where, you know, the zoning is very generous and developers can build a lot where it wouldn't really affect an existing neighborhood. So we know that there's a need to balance growth and development. So, you know, that's sort of our goal. I would say housing affordability and zoning are not a one-to-one relationship. There's a lot of other factors at play. So, you know, I don't think we could zone all of Center City CMX5, but I don't think it'd make much of a difference in the cost of housing in the near term anyway. So I would say we're gonna have all these comments after the meeting and a recording of the meeting, and you know, we'll be able to go back and sort of tweak things. We won't do that till after the in-person meeting, but you know, what you see here is not fine.
Just some general comments. Yeah, again, just comments that we need to get the more announcements out, which we'll certainly do to make sure that everyone's aware of this. And actually, can you also explain, Ian, why we stopped at Walnut Street and didn't continue
Yes.
all the way to Market?
So from Walnut up to Market is zone CMX5. You know, any change would, you know, since it's all five, would have to be a down zoning. And I don't think that it's feasible to propose down zoning, you know, north of Walnuts, you know, so close to Market Street, where the subway is. So, you know, there's parts of the city that, you know, by their nature will be zoned for the highest amount of density, and that's one of those areas. So it was a conscious decision to sort of not touch that area so as to not sort of undercut the entire effort to do these other remappings.
All right, and again, this meeting is being recorded, and we will post the recording of the meeting. We will post the chat. If people have additional questions about their specific property, I encourage them to email Ian or myself, or attend the next meeting in 2 weeks. And again, the meeting in 2 weeks will be the identical meeting, so there will be no changes at all, even ones that, you know, we agree to or consider between this meeting and 1 2 weeks from now. So it'll be the same map, the same presentation.
I also put my phone number in the chat. So, you know, if email's not good for you, you can call me.
Great. I think I've read through any questions. Are there any other new unique questions that any other community member has? Okay, Ian.
I saw in the chat. So Councilman Swilla knows what we're doing with this process. So he's sort of given us the green light to go ahead and develop recommendations. So he's aware of what we're doing. Don't know if he's here at this meeting, but you know, he's aware of the process, and we're in communication with him throughout the various steps.
And I would imagine, and there will certainly be, after these two meetings, another meeting with the Civic Association regarding this, and we'll, at some point, we'll be certain to make certain Councilman Swilla is presenting. It wouldn't be appropriate at this one, since it's just discussing the bill, but once the bill is getting closer to being presented, then he should certainly be presenting to the community, and we'll make certain that happens. So Ian and Mason, I think, thank you very much for your time. It's been really informative. Thank you for being so quick and efficient. Tammy especially is happy with that, because there's some other things we need to do.
No problem. Yeah. So do you know do you know the location of the meeting in 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's going to be in the Bloomley building,
Got it.
7 o'clock, first floor.
And Jonathan, I'm sorry, I just want to address one more question in the chat. If anyone, not just questions, but also comments, are more than welcome to be sent to me and Ian. There's not a formal process. We take it all and put it all together. Thank you for your interest.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Since we have enough time to go through committee reports, I do want to make a quick announcement about communication out to our community. I mean, we're an all volunteer group here. And if people have other means of getting the word out to your neighbors, I know that Lynn Landis and Maria are coming up with ideas on block captains and things like that to help get the word out more. We are all here to work together on broadcasting this information, but we can only do so much. If people want to get together and knock on doors or leave flyers out, I don't know. We really don't know any other way of communicating to the masses. We cannot do radio. We cannot do newspaper advertising, can't do television. So, I mean, we're all here together as a group. So if you know someone who doesn't know anything about this, please let them know. That's really, really important to talk to your neighbors right now. Katie?
I was just going to say, all this information is also always in our e-posts, which come to your inbox every week. We'd love for you to be a paying member, but if it's something that you can't do right now or don't want to, you can still get the e-post. Sign up for it. You don't have to go hunting for information. It'll come right to you. Like if social media is not your thing, websites, etc.
Bob?
We should note that we sent this email out to 1,800 different email addresses and 622 people opened it. So to say that we're not reaching out to people, I think is a little bit of understatement. So 622 people knew about this meeting, but only 40 people felt the need to attend. So just in fairness to the people that are doing our media, we are reaching more people than show up to these meetings. So I just want to put that out there and
Bob, that is
for what it's worth.
great. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. Marissa, did you have something you wanted to say? Or you were just clapping for Bob?
I was just virtually agreeing with Bob, because I
Okay,
think that the media people have really stepped it up and are doing a great job. So thank you for all of your work.
yes, I totally agree. Totally agree. So we do the best that we can with what we have, everybody. So let's get into a couple committee reports, because I know that first, Bob, could you just make a statement about the Treasury reports so everyone understands what we're doing there right now?
All right, we're just finishing up a year end, so I don't have I didn't put together interim numbers for tonight because I hope by the next meeting to have year end numbers completed with the accountants to get it done a little earlier this year. So that's and substantially there's no change from the last meeting we had, other than that Drew's been working to get us some grant money. I don't think he's ready to announce it yet, but there's a possibility that we get a $5,000 grant if the community can raise 5,000 to match it, which would make a tremendous difference.
I
You know,
totally agree, 1,000%. All right, let's go right into membership, because they have a whole presentation that I'd love them to show. So Adam and Patrick?
Yep, thank you so much. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great, wonderful. I mean, it's a perfect segue. When I read the comments in the chat box about, reaching out to folks and people want to get on the street and talk to people, I think it's fantastic. But one of the great ways that we can really have an impact in our community and be involved in our community is becoming members of Washington Square West Civic Association. So before I get into the presentation, I just want to acknowledge a couple of people. First of all, I want to thank Tammy, Marissa, Leanne, and Robert, and most importantly, my co-chairperson, Patrick, who spent countless hours with me over the Christmas holidays, putting together this presentation and doing a lot of the legwork that we need to do to come to you with some plans around the strategy for our membership committee in 2023. Next slide. Just a small disclaimer. This presentation, about 8 to 13 slides, excuse me, data and facts was based upon member discussions and review of available documents and financial statements in the Google Drive and from other participants from the board. I just want to say that our recommendations here, the comments that I have and representing, are not a reflection of anybody's work dedicated to the community, the Civic Association, but rather a recognition of the opportunities ahead. There's been great work done here over the past couple of years by the board, and there's a huge opportunity to advance it as it relates to membership, and recognize that we're all volunteered to make Washington Square West a better place. So let's continue the journey. The agenda for this presentation is over the following topics. I want to talk about our process. I want to talk about statistics, analysis of membership, some research that we've done, talk a little bit about our strategic plan, some tactical implementation, and planning for 2023. So relate to our process. This is what we have done so far, and this is our plan going forward. So Patrick and I agreed on a high-level strategy and work process. We agreed on sources of data and the data itself and measures of success. We attended the membership committee December meeting to learn more about what's been done in the past and getting up to speed. We had a working session with Leanne to review files, data, questions, best practices. And we also attended the recent December finance meeting to review revenues and data processes. Today, we are here to share at the board meeting our plan, at least that's been written for right now, and to obtain input and comments, and then start to develop more detailed slides and information as we develop the full strategic plan and tactical plan implementation for 2023. Shortly after this presentation, we'll have our first organized membership committee meeting. And as I will encourage you throughout this process, please participate in that meeting if you are on the call tonight. And as Tammy had mentioned, all board members will be on the membership committee, which I'm very excited to have join. And we're going to share our membership plan at the second monthly public meeting. So that'll be after the first membership committee meeting that'll occur this month. And then we're going to get to work. And then on a quarterly basis, we're going to update the membership. We're going to update the board and the public at the public presentations on our achievements as we progress through the quarter. Slow me down if I'm going too fast. I just want to reflect the time that we have allocated. First of all, let's just take a look at our community. We have a total population of about 12,000 people, 7,000 residents, approximately 3.6 thousand households with approximately 1.9 residents per household. And we have 10% of our households with children. The median age in Washington Square West is 33 years of age, and the average household income is $98,000. The average housing price is around $683,000. We have 27% of our properties in Washington Square West owner occupied, and 73% of the properties in Washington Square West rental units. And those statistics are really important to acknowledge and understand because it will drive the way we evolve our membership in the Washington Square West Civic Association. And we need to recognize things like percent of households with children, so we can devise programs that are specific to those. Recognize a median age of 33, which suggests that we need to think about not just face-to-face interactions and street interactions, but using social media and maximizing our social media. And by the way, this is not a suggestion that we're not doing so, but it's really recognizing what we have. And then last but not least, which what I thought was very interesting, is that we have 73% of the properties in Washington Square West that are rental units. So that being the case, we need to do a better job, not that we haven't done so already, about reaching out and finding the renters in our neighborhoods and talking to the landlords who manage these properties. Just some data that's important for our community.
Hey, Adam, real
Yes.
quick. Someone is asking, what's the difference between the total population and residents? So you got 12,000 people, but in residents, you're saying there's only 7,000.
Yeah, the total population would be the number of people that live here, but residents might be a household, one resident being a household.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And please grab those questions for me and stop me as I go, because I can't look at the questions and do the presentation at the same time. The next slide is our Civic Association membership data. And excuse my dog in the background, so I apologize. We have 13 levels of membership, lays out the costs. And in 2021, we had 287 members that generated roughly $22,000 in membership income. And in 2022, we had 282 members generating around $23,000 in membership income. So the net of that is membership is declining in our Civic Association, only slightly, but we need to spend more time looking at membership value, and increasing our membership levels so that we can do flyers, so that we can do more programs, so that we have a more active community and more people involved in events and creating more events. And this is something that's going to be critical to the success of the Civic Association, because without money and membership, nothing else will happen. We just can't create events and activities without the dollars to support it. Going back to some statistics that I thought were very, very interesting that I would categorize as low-hanging fruit. We have over 100 retail stores in Washington Square West. These are commercial stores that are interested in the success of their business and rely on our residents and our tourists who come to our neighborhood to generate income. And we should be thinking about how we leverage those stores and work with those stores to create opportunities for them to better commercialize their their business, as well as getting them more involved in the Civic Association. We have over 2,800 employers in Washington Square West. I myself work in a building at 1218 Chestnut Street. We have 10 floors and over 30 employers. And probably many of these employers are not actively involved, nor do they have memberships in Washington Square West. And these are folks that are utilizing our resources, have employees coming to our neighborhoods and shopping in our stores and eating in our restaurants, and we need to leverage that. And we have over 2,900 rental units in Washington Square West. And that, evokes a different type of approach in terms of reaching renters, and also recognizing that their devotion and loyalty to Washington Square West may be a little bit different than a homeowner. We have over 1,500 University of Arts students, and we have over 8,200 Jefferson students. So that is suggestive of also the opportunity to get students involved in Washington Square West Civic Association, not only from a volunteering standpoint, which always looks good on a resume and LinkedIn, but also getting involved in some of the community activities that can deliver great success for our community. With that, all that in mind, my co-chair Patrick and I have put together what we call our strategic plan with our specific objectives, stakeholders, and measurements. Our goal for 2023 is to generate membership revenues of $50,000. That's doubling what we earned in 2022. As part of that, we need to validate and enhance the value of the WSW Civic Association membership via tangible, meaningful benefits. It's not enough to say, join Washington Square West Civic Association. It has to be a two-way street. So if we're going to ask retail stores to join the Civic Association, we need to give them a tangible benefit. And it has to be meaningful so that they'll be willing to put up the money to join. We need to generate significant growth of membership from retail and institutional members while increasing our individual membership base. As I showed earlier of the 13 levels of membership, you can grow your individual membership base at $50 a shot. But if you get retail institutional memberships at $250 and $500 a shot, you can generate a lot more money. That's not to suggest individual membership base is not important, is extremely important. But we also need to think about the resources that we apply to retail and institutional members, and to think about growing that membership base. And then last but not least, we need to develop a highly engaged membership. It's not enough to pay. We need to develop consistent communications through the appropriate platforms, resulting in an active participation in communities and events. So we have some great events out there, but it should always be a goal of our membership committee to get people to attend those events, because engaged membership results in impact. And the stakeholders are obvious. We need our retail stores, we need our employers or institutions, we need our residents and our landlords, and we need our board very involved in membership. And as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to generate $50,000 in membership revenue. Specifically, we want to get 25 retail, 10 institutions, and 400 individual members. That if we achieve those specific performance metrics, we can achieve our goal of $50,000. And we want to kick off a membership drive with a monthly thermometer of attainment goals. We want to recognize new membership, and we want to get out there and make sure everybody knows about the Civic Association so that we can increase the amount of resources that we can apply to the neighborhood. Any questions so far in the chat that I can address?
No, you're good.
Okay, great. So how do we do this? It's not enough to just to have a strategic plan and objectives and identify stakeholders and measurements. The what is fine, but the how is most important. And the how really consists of 4 buckets. And I won't go through these buckets in great detail, but highlight a few things that are really important. Some of them I've mentioned so far. We need to validate and enhance the value of the membership. It's not enough to just have 13 levels of membership and assume that we're offering a value that is important to the folks that are looking to join. So we need to define it. We need to create new assets. We need to increase our branding presence. We need to maximize our social media presence wherever we can with positive news and events. And we need to survey our members and we understand from our community what they want. We need to generate significant growth of our membership, as I talked about, generating more members from retail stores and institutions. And we need to look at our past membership database and reconnect and recontact with those. And we need to take and leverage our existing membership to validate our value and to reinforce our value. And we need to recognize our new members and find ways of generating more awareness to grow our membership. The next bucket is developing a highly engaged membership. So we need to develop a plan for consistent communications for new and existing members. You know, the e-posts are great, but maybe there's other ways that we can maximize our social media presence across TikTok and Facebook and Next Door Neighbor and all the other things and all the other ways of reaching membership outside of just face-to-face interaction. And we need to increase participation in our committees, and we need to enhance our existing and develop new events and increase event attendance. And then last but not least is what I talked about from the beginning, which is a numerical value goal of $50,000 by 12/31/23. So far, we've started out 2023 strong. Many of you, I hope, will have received or did receive on January the 2nd, the Happy New Year posting that came through Constant Contact. In addition, we sent out to our Constant Contact members and our membership email list a year-end summary of all the great things we did in 2022. And then last but not least, for the new members that were identified and joined in the 4th quarter of 2022, we send out a new member welcome letter. So hopefully each of you may have received one or all of these communications, and hopefully they reinforce the value of the Civic Association, and more importantly, gave you more and relevant information that is of value to you. Our plan for the upcoming 4 quarters is as follows. For Q1, we have a number of things in mind and suggested and planned, including developing and finalizing a strategic plan, updating our individual retail institutional membership offering and assets. We'd like to be able to do a membership survey at some point in the 1st quarter. We'd like to put together a communication plan, and then we want to kick off our community grassroots outreach, In Q2, we'd like to see about updating our website with the new value proposition for membership, taking a look at our membership levels. We need to look at our Quicken membership database and the API that needs to be connected between Quicken and Constant Contact, and then continue our grassroots outreach in Q3 and Q4 the same. And hopefully by the end of Q4, if not sooner, we will have achieved our $50,000 goal. Last but not least, our membership starts today with our day one ask to our board members, as well as those participants in today's public meetings. For those of you who don't have a WSW Civic Association contact card on your phone, please text me and I can share with you a copy of one that I've created, which contains not only our email address, but also contains our QR code, which you can share with anybody. And I'll show it to you right here if you don't see it in front, as well as the link to the Washington Square West website. So in a moment's notice, you meet somebody on the street and you say, "Oh, are you a member of Washington Square West Civic Association?" And they say, "No, don't know anything about it." And then you can send them your own contact information, which is specific to Washington Square West, with a QR code, with the link, and with our email address. The second thing I'm going to ask each of our board members and participants on today's call is to engage. I'd like to each of you to reach out to 5 people on your block this month. Text them, call them, and email them, and invite them to become members of the Civic Association. I think 5 people that is not on our current membership committee, excuse me, our membership, is not a lot of ask for anybody who's on this call. The third thing I'd like to ask is to come to our first membership meeting. Come prepared with ideas. Think about what we presented tonight, and let's brainstorm and come up with great ways to increase our membership and talk about our value proposition. And then last but not least, I'd like to ask each of our board members and each of the participants in today's call that if you're a member of the Washington Square West Civic Association, or you're a member of the board, update your LinkedIn and your Facebook about your membership. Post about events. Take the e-post and post it on your Facebook and leverage the network that you have, even if it's outside Washington Square West, and reinforce what we're doing here and share positive news. It's amazing what you can do just by putting your Washington Square West Civic Association membership on LinkedIn. And quite frankly, I did check out a couple of our LinkedIn, our board members, and a few board members, and I'm not going to call them out by name, don't even have their Washington Square West Civic Association membership as a board member on their LinkedIn. And some LinkedIn and some of our members, nothing, and I'm not pointing out anybody specific, I can't even link into you via LinkedIn because you're not available publicly. And then you may be doing that for personal, professional reasons. But let's tell everybody about what we're doing. And for some people, that might not be a possibility because of the organizations they're involved in. But for those of you who can do so, please update your social media to reflect your participation in Washington Square West. And then last but not least, I wanted to thank again the board for giving me the time to present this tonight to the public meeting, and Patrick, who has given incredible amount of time working with me to develop the first part of our strategic plan, and looking forward to meeting and working with each of you on the committee for membership in the very near future. I'll stop there and address any questions, myself or Patrick.
Yeah, Adam, thank you so much. That was great. And Lynn and Maria and everyone who is sending in the chat ideas, please, I know you guys are going to be on the membership committee, but please make sure you write them all down. And when you get into the meeting, we can talk about all of these things. I think it's so important, everybody, for 2023, that we are all working together here, working together, not separately, but as one cohesive group. It's going to be so important for us moving forward. So yes, is there any questions for Adam or Patrick before I move on? Anybody? We will publicize that meeting as much as we can when, and Adam, I don't think you have that down yet, right? For when you're having the membership meeting.
I think we're going to use the existing membership meeting date that's been on there on the calendar before. I don't anticipate making any changes to when the membership team has met in the past. So I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. Maybe Patrick can.
The only reason I would recommend potentially changing it is because it's on MLK, and then the following is on President's Day. So both January and February fall on one of the federal holidays.
Okay, so Patrick and I mean, look, I want to respect people's holidays, but at the same point in time, consistency is also good. So Patrick and I will look at the calendar and see what other dates are available, especially during those holidays, because people will travel. Yes, we'll look into rescheduling those accordingly for January and February. Thank you.